digital church doesn't work for the
no.
the Catholic Church.
No,
like,
it does not. I remember all the debates. Can we do Eucharist online with how they do Lord's Supper? Luckily, I hear friends who are like, no, and other friends were like, yes. And I'm just like, yeah, no, I'll just stick with, getting the Eucharist how it usually is. So appreciate you guys trying to be inclusive, but you're kind of missing the point of church.
Consuming together, we become together.
Yep.
Same blood of Christ running through our veins,
Yep.
And so we become family.
That's why
by blood.
Yeah, by blood. Yeah, it's communion. Like in the word, like we commune together through Christ who unites us.
Hey, and welcome to Barrel Aged Faith. I got my buddy Nicky back in the studio, and
Hello.
It is
good to be back on, Kyle.
Yeah, man. Had you on for St. Patrick's celebration back here during Holy Week.
It is
the
Holy
holiest
Week.
of weeks.
Yes, it is the holiest of weeks.
I just get so much out of Holy Week.
Oh yeah, Holy Week's great. And again, if you ever have the privilege of actually going to the Holy Land, like, because I actually was on Mount Olives. I used to walk the streets to following the Passion of Christ from the stations. Even if you can't go to the Holy Land, you can get so much from the Holy Week because it is such a beautiful, emotional time. So
yeah, I feel like that's one of the points of the liturgy is to bring the senses of the Holy Land to us. Like entering into liturgy kind of takes you to those places as almost kind of you're being like transported. Hopping on the yellow magic school bus and actually going there some way.
Oh yeah. And then also it's like, again, I do a lot of work with pilgrimage stuff in general with my research. The church is being a pilgrimage church. So we're all going together to the summit, which is the Eucharist. And so that's the liturgy too, is a form of pilgrimage in itself as well. So
that's good. Like the liturgy is a form of pilgrimage and like journeying together.
Yeah.
I especially think about this whenever I go to the Easter Vigil, that night where many people enter into the Catholic Church as catechumens and are baptized. There's a lot of imagery there of journey. When you listen to the liturgy and the scripture readings, you're going through the Old Testament. And so the Paschal candle, the Easter candle, which is gigantic.
It's big.
That gets blessed for the first time that year. Then everyone's little candle gets lit from it. You're outside with a bonfire. And then you enter in journeying into the church with the Paschal candle leading the way.
Yeah.
And that represents like the pillar of fire at night in the wilderness.
Yes.
So I feel like the journey imagery is just right there in the liturgy.
Well, yeah, because again, they journey throughout the wilderness. God journeys down to us as, taking flesh. And again, how the Catholic Church, how we describe the Eucharist as being the source and summit of our faith. And in summit implies, a mountaintop.
Yeah.
So going to the mountain of God and seeing where God is visiting us. I like it when there's a high, altar and stuff like that, where you have to look up more. And it's like, because it's the summit,
Yeah. Like, so even when you get out of your pew to go like receive the Eucharist, you're journeying up the mountain is kind of the imagery going on there with a church.
Yeah. I wish we would sing some of the Psalms of Ascent while we did that. That'd be really cool, actually.
So the Jews would sing like Psalms called the Psalms of Ascent when they go up Mount Zion.
Yeah. When they would journey up to Jerusalem.
Going back to that like Exodus, Old Testament imagery, you got the Easter Vigil, you got the Paschal candle representing the pillar of fire. And then we have a lot of baptisms that night, which of course St. Paul connects to the parting of the Red Seas and the people of God passing through those parting of the waters. And the water both destroys your past, but also ushers in like a new future.
Yeah, it's amazing like how baptism is like when you start looking for baptism throughout the Bible, how much it appears because you have the Red Sea, you have also Noah's flood too. That's connected in Peter.
Peter says baptism saves you, and then he talks about Noah's flood.
And of course, and then when the Israelites go into the Holy Land too, crossing a river, like
the Jordan River, and then also like the Eucharist itself, it's like there's many layers to that, but manna in the desert.
Yes, manna
in
the desert.
Eucharist is not only the destination, but it's also the food that's getting you there.
Yes, the journey is to Christ, but Christ is on the journey with us. The pilgrimage, a journey is relational. There's like a place you're going to, but that place is also a person.
Yeah, amen. So he's both like, he's the manna and the sustenance that gets us to where we need, but also when we arrive, he's like the milk and honey of the promised land. He's also the Paschal Lamb of the Passover. He's the tree of life. So when we get to the book of Revelation, the end of our journey, when he makes all things new and brings heaven and earth together in a union, which is also at the Easter Vigil. Easter Vigil, they talk about it being like heaven and earth being wedded together. He's the tree of life. the medicine of immortality.
It's so great.
Yeah.
It's just thinking about it just sends chills like throughout my body. Because again, he's also journeying with us too. There's that solidarity with us. So
he's also the pillar of fire.
Yep.
And he's also the new Moses. He's just kind of all around.
Well, yeah, he's God.
We're going through a book in our church called Becoming a Eucharistic People.
We are journeying together.
Yeah. It's really talking about like why it's so important to have a type of like liturgical, sacramental, Eucharistic environment at your home, in your parish, in your city. And that can go a pretty long way.
The Eucharist is transforming us.
Yeah.
And that transformation should affect all aspects of our lives. So
in my imagination, sometimes I imagine the altar being the most important place in the city, the altar of a Catholic church. And so from the altar, which again represents like Mount Zion, the rivers of Eden kind of flowing out, like every good thing comes from Christ. So in the Eucharist, he comes to us in a very special way. And so those blessings then kind of run forth through the city. And if we become who we're supposed to become, that's the catch, which a lot of times it doesn't. But if we do, then we can bring Eden into our own city.
Exactly. In my opinion, that's the whole point of the Christian life. We were casted out of Eden, but now through Christ, we can create a new Eden. Because again, Christ is going to create a new Eden, but he's creating it through us, and then he will cap it when he returns.
Yeah, consummate it.
That's why you see this in Europe, in some other countries, where the church is at the center of the city. Because again, like that is the most important thing. That's the center of the city life, is the church.
Supposed to be the tallest building too.
That too, but
I think in Richmond, St. Andrew, is it taller than the courthouse?
I don't know actually.
It's
close. I wish cities were more like built around the church, but again, that time has kind of passed. So now, what do we do now? Like that's kind of, I feel like what this book is like. Okay, these things are past. So what do we do now?
There was a really cool interview and video that was released, I think by Matt Whitman, the Bible Hour, 10-minute Bible Hour guy.
Oh yeah, that guy. I love that.
Yeah,
guy.
He visited a Byzantine Catholic church in Illinois.
I love his church visits. Those are such good videos.
He does a really good job. It was in a neighborhood, and all around they built a new church, but all around the church, there was the dumping grounds of the city. I don't think it was that bad, but a lot of kind of like runoff water that didn't smell good.
I watched this video too.
And there was a lot of trash. The neighborhood viewed that as a bad place in the neighborhood. And so the church, the land kind of ran up against it and was part of it. And so what they did was they created a whole new way for the water to go, and they created gardens and prairies and created the kind of like an eco landscape. And now it's like the favorite place in the neighborhood to hike and walk and pray.
It shows the transformation that we can do in the surrounding environment that our church is based around.
They planted a lot of flowers, so the birds and the butterflies are enjoying it. The neighborhood, the people are enjoying it. It's a way for actually the neighborhood and the church to kind of come together.
Yeah.
And in a project that's both physical and spiritual.
Yeah. Like speaking, like again, this is not a Catholic seminary. The seminary I go to, Bethany Theological Seminary, is associated with the Church of the Brethren. Speaking about the transformation of neighborhoods, Bethany started buying, some of the houses in the neighborhood to house some of the students there, and the students in the Bethany community started cleaning up the neighborhood, and the neighborhood has gotten a lot better, beautiful wise, because of that commitment from Bethany. Like that's shown to the neighborhood and to the Richmond community. We're serious about like this transformation power. So again, these are some concrete things about what we can do in our lives that are tied into the Eucharist, that the source of the Eucharist is wanting to transform and make things beautiful in the life around us. So
yeah, that's so cool. Recently, our church even like installed the Stations of the Cross outdoors.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. So next to St. Andrews now, you can go and pray the Stations of the Cross, follow the footsteps of Christ outside with a little path. And the idea is that it's not only a place of prayer for the church, but also the neighborhood.
It was the Eagle Scout project. So I'm also an Eagle Scout. So I was really happy when I heard that was the Eagle Scout project. I was like, good job.
And so in this chapter that we're reading, it's talking about how popular Catholicism has been lost. How should we define the word popular?
Popular should be defined not because of fame, as Timothy O'Malley says. It's popular in the sense of the people. It's from the people. This is what the people are doing.
Populist.
Yeah.
I think of one example. I think in the past, if you went to a Catholic home, it would have looked Catholic.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Catholic like paintings and art and rosaries, and the family Bible would have been like in a very special place within the home. Then what you see kind of happen is kind of like Americanization happen, where it's almost like iconoclasm in the American household where everything gets whitewashed. Now it's all about interior design trends.
Yeah.
And then so when you enter into a Catholic home, most of the time it doesn't really feel like it's an aspect of the church.
Yeah.
But instead, what's trending.
Exactly.
In American culture.
And that's kind of sad in that regard, because again, we're supposed to be not of the world, but live in the world, but not of the world. Of course, it depends on the person, but like thankfully, like I've seen Catholics around my age who just got married, both of them Catholic and jazz. I walk in their home and I see nice painting of Jesus, painting of Mary, a cross on almost every doorway and stuff like that, a cross in every room, which I'm like, nice. I know I'm in a Catholic house because of that. And also I know when there's Catholic houses when I see a statue of Mary outside. So that's a nice way to keep certain people from knocking on your door. But but it's also a nice way to know, it's like, oh, this is a Catholic house. But at the same time, no, we shouldn't be relying on these decorations though. But they're serve as a reminder for us.
Yeah, they really serve as places of prayer.
Yeah.
Like they point to prayer is really the ultimate, I think, goal, which is the heart of Catholic worship is communing and praying with God. And so even when you ask for the intercession of the saints, it's really just to enhance your own prayers. I mean, you're inviting them to pray with you, for you, as one big family.
Yep.
Yeah. We've tried to, as a family, incorporate more and more. I think year after year, we tend to add more and more things to our home. We do have a statue of Mary, but we haven't built like a nice grotto or a nice area yet. And so we're
built a grotto yet?
Not yet. I know all my free time. She's not outside yet because we want to make sure she's in a good place. But we also want to get like a Saint Michael the Archangel kind of outdoor statue, or Saint Francis sometime. But in our home, we have a few different things going on. Like we have a crucifix right when you walk in. I'm installing a holy water font, so when you come in, you can make the sign of the cross with holy water like you would do in a Catholic church. I have several kids, I have 6, and so we have some really young ones, and so we haven't installed certain things yet. We're trying to make sure they don't get broken.
Yeah,
or that I adapt the piece so that it can stand the test of time. So the holy water font's not up yet because I have to do a couple things to it to make it survive. Right now, this is the very first time we've ever done this, but you know, like if you enter into a Catholic church during kind of the last couple weeks of Lent, how they drape the statues.
Oh yeah, veiling the statues.
Yeah, we haven't done any veiling of the statues, but what we did is we draped over the TV, so we're not watching TV right now.
Ooh,
and then I put an icon of the crucifixion, an icon of the crucifixion. So it's like a red cloth curtain over the TV with our palm branches. It's almost become like a prayer station.
Yeah.
Instead of the TV being like the center of the house, which for most Americans it is. You're looking at Jesus right now. So
that's pretty cool.
One little thing that we've done.
Yeah, that's a really nice tradition that you started.
Some of the kids were excited, and others were like, "What?"
But I
don't know if I like this new this tradition.
Yeah, that is a nice tradition though. So these popular traditions. So like we have, the rosary is a popular tradition. We have the Stations of the Cross. And then we have some of the stuff that Kyle's been talking about with like in the house. And so this chapter is kind of just reminding us that like when we leave the church, we need to take the church outside with us. That's what I basically got from the chapter. I don't know. What about you, Kyle?
Oh, absolutely. I'm even glad he brought up fasting. The fasting and the feasting are very much a part of like Catholic life. And what it does, it puts you into a rhythm of celebrating and then also kind of like repentance. And so it's hard to like keep your mind like always repentance. Even though we should, and we should always be celebrating. So these seasons help us to kind of bring things because we're so limited in our frail human selves. The cycle of fasting and feasting are really important. And this becomes very apparent during the Lenten season and then the Easter season. In our house, of course, Fridays, you're not eating meat. And like it was hard because we were just on spring break.
Oh yeah.
So we been out all day on Friday, but then it was the evening. And so we had to go to a restaurant. Well, we had to pass by this cool, like, steak restaurant and cheeseburger restaurant. We ended up just getting kind of like a vegetarian pizza and cheese pizza. But it was, I think, intentional that the kids realized like it was, I could tell that they took it seriously.
That's good.
Because my kids are young, but they're getting older and older. It's cool to see these traditions grow with them. And then I'm always trying to explain why we're doing that. Uniting our suffering with Christ on Fridays, feasting on Sundays. And so we try to have like a Sunday meal. It doesn't always happen like where it's always fancy, but I do try to like, instead of making Friday night or Saturday night like our biggest meal that I cook, I try to make that Sunday.
Yeah.
that's taken some time, but that's one way to do it.
And I've always found that like children typically are more open and receiving of these traditions or appreciating the mysteries, especially when it comes to the Eucharist, I think. Because again, they're like, oh my gosh, Jesus. Because I remember going to church. I was in Columbus visiting friends, and I was like, I got to find a place to go to church. So I went to church, and during the consecration, there was like a little kid, like probably 3 years old, I think. And he was behind me and he was saying, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I was like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right, little one.
Crying out, shouting out. Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
It was super cute. It was super wholesome. It was very beautiful. And while they might not understand it fully, they know the most important aspect of the Eucharist is that it's Jesus with us. So,
yeah, I'll never forget. And this is an example that he brings up in the book, and that is doing more like Eucharistic processions outside. Typically, you have like a canopy with Christ and the Eucharist. What you do is you're parading, kind of like having a procession of prayer and praise outside. And I remember that we did this a couple of years ago at our church, where we actually in the evening, it was getting dark, and we like walked around the block, and we were going down like streets, like in the middle of the street, singing songs to Jesus.
That's pretty cool.
It was really cool. It stuck out to my kids because, number one, kids know they're not supposed to go in the street.
Yeah.
Right? Like walk down the middle of the street. As parents, you hit that home so many times. Like if you go in the street, you're going to die. You know, you want them to really feel like they're going to die if they just touch the street, especially when they're little. You know? And so they remembered that we were walking down the middle of the street, and then we had to explain what we were doing. And I remember them really getting a lot out of that experience. And so he really encourages doing that a whole lot more in Catholic parishes, because that used to happen quite a bit. Corpus Christi processions. And
because the only time I ever did it was the Corpus Christi procession. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I wish we did it more.
Of course, we always are worshiping the Lord like at Mass and in these other expressions. But the more diverse you go, I think it really helps kind of fill out the imaginative landscape, like in your mind, like in your experience of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Because sometimes our faith can get so boxed into the clouds, like, oh, my faith is just like in my head.
Yeah.
But when you use your full body, that's why I like doing a lot of like outdoor hikes that involve retreats and prayer.
Yep. Because he talks about Eucharistic retreats too in this chapter as well. Our faith is not, like you said, Kyle, a cloud in the sky. It doesn't really affect anything. Again, our faith is embodied. Our faith affects our body. It affects our life. Because again, we preach Christ crucified every time we receive the Eucharist. And you receive the Eucharist physically. Again, we're not this Gnostic thing of just trying to escape our body.
I know some churches on Holy Thursday, they'll do adoration for a long time afterwards. It's really kind of representing when the disciples are praying. Well, they're supposed to be praying with Jesus in Gethsemane, you know, and he's like, couldn't you watch with me for an hour? Couldn't you stay awake with me and pray with me? That phrase really sticks with us during adoration, particularly when you're doing it in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Which, you know, sometimes we'll sign up. Hey, you got the midnight slot, the 3 o'clock in the morning slot. Some people have to get out of their houses in the middle of the night and drive to the church to spend time in prayer with the Lord for that hour. That's Gethsemane.
Yep.
That's Mount Olives, middle of the night. Couldn't you stay awake with me?
I know, like that verse, like no matter what Catholic church I go to for adoration, that verse is always around. Like, can't you just give an hour? Like, can't you stay for an hour? You know, and that really convicts me, especially when I go to adoration. And he talks about himself going to adoration in the middle of the night, and him like, you know, I went in the winter. It was like 3 a.m. I forget what time he said. It was this chapter, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure it was this chapter.
I don't remember.
It's all blending together. It's like sometimes I fell asleep, sometimes I stayed the whole way, but I still showed up, and it was before Christ. And honestly, I personally have the best like naps in front of Christ during that time. I know I shouldn't be falling assaip, but like it's nice just
you're restfully praying in Him.
Yes, the Holy Spirit is praying a lot more.
That's a very Saint Teresa of Lisieux kind of thing to do, to kind of like just rest in the arms of Christ, like as a little child.
Yeah,
that's kind of the way of the little flower. There's a type of spirituality that lends to you taking naps during adoration.
Oh yeah,
but don't do it always.
I don't try to. It's just you're just you're just praying, and you're just like you just feel like the peace of Christ with you, and then you're just like,
there you go. You get so peaceful, so peaceful. Yeah, so that's really that's cool. Eucharistic adoration is a great way to pull people. And Deacon Jack Wright shared a story with my theology classroom one time where growing up, his dad, when they would go to like Indianapolis to go watch a sports game, like go watch the Pacers or something.
Yeah.
Afterwards, they always knew of like a church there that did adoration on like Friday nights all night long or late night. And he always remembered going there with his dad after a big game or going to Indianapolis for something. And he actually said that was a key formative time with his dad in those times of prayer with Jesus, in his discernment to the priesthood. And so he'll be ordained a priest here really shortly soon.
Wow. Praise be to God.
Yeah. So that's Deacon Jack, right? He was just at church on Sunday.
Oh, he preached?
Yeah, that's right. Deacon Jack.
That's Deacon, right.
Yep. All that to be said, when we talk about popular Catholicism, it's not just about getting your family to look more Catholic. It's like, no, like we're making disciples.
Yes.
And when you make disciples, some of those disciples are going to become priests. Some are going to become missionaries. Some are going to start a business, but that business is going to do great good.
Yeah. And some of them are going to start a podcast.
Well, there you go. A family podcast.
Family podcast. Looking at you, Kyle.
Yeah.
If that wasn't clear. But yeah, like again, the whole point is not to just on the outside look Catholic. The whole point is to be Catholic on the outside and on the inside, to be transformed. And that's why, again, like in the chapter, it talks about how the house is called domestic church. And I love that metaphor. I also like calling the house the domestic monastery too. That's just because I just like being a monk and having the monk spirituality. If I wasn't like getting called to marriage, I'd probably be a monk or something like that.
Hey, there's still time.
My girlfriend would not appreciate that.
You got to at least give it a shot to discern.
That's true.
Maybe 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
I mean, marriage, even though it's not the monastic life, the married life and the family life does take something from the monastery and incorporates it into the home. That's why the feasting and fasting cycles and saying the prayers and the evening prayers. I mean, my family, we're not there, but the goal is to like year by year get there. Then when your kids have kids, it's going to come a lot more naturally to them because remember, we've like lost a generation or two.
Yep.
So like we're trying to get that back. And that's going to require extra effort because it's so countercultural. It doesn't come natural to us. It's sort of like I grew up with only having a brother. My wife only had one brother, and now we have 6 kids. And so we have to learn what it means to even have a big family. That's like a new thing. And there's not a lot of people we can ask on how to do that well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how well we're doing it, but
I mean, like, hey, they look healthy, they look happy. So I'm like,
they get good grades. They love Jesus.
I was gonna say you're doing pretty well there.
Yeah. Their fights are very healthy, very feisty with each other.
Well, yeah, they're kids. What do you expect on that front? If you're not fighting with your sibling, like, do you love them? You know?
Yeah, I've heard that when you live in a big family, those kids become really good college dorm roommates.
Really?
Because they're used to already like living with other people. Imagine the only kid who's never lived with anybody, and then they have to share a room with some jerk or slob. Have a really hard time in college. But my kids, they're used to slobs and jerks because they have their siblings. Like, oh, I've been doing that for 18 years. Yeah. I can put up with you. Like, you're not even close to nearly as bad as my brother or sister.
Well, again, like nobody expects, God doesn't expect us to be perfect because we're not going to be perfect. But the point is we're supposed to be practicing. You know, we're supposed to be trying. And God is going to hold us and give us the grace when we fail and when we mess up because God is a loving Father. So, and it's trying to bring us to this life abundantly. You have to tailor some of these ideas of how you're going to make your house, your family, or things like that to your specific context, because not everybody can do X because of reason Y. You know, don't compare yourselves to other families either, because comparison is the thief of all joy. I forget who said that, but I'm stealing that quote.
Oh, so. Yeah, every family is very different from each other, and they have their own strengths and their own weaknesses.
And don't start with like 20 things. Do one and do it good. And then once you have that as a habit, a new thing,
you're going to fail a bunch of times.
Oh, yeah.
Before it becomes a habit. I think of it kind of like skiing.
Skiing.
Like, you can't learn how to ski without falling. You're going to start on the bunny hill.
Yeah.
And you're going to fall a bunch on the bunny hill. Have you ever been skiing?
No.
Well, that's why you don't understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, you put these like big long sleds on your feet and then you can't walk or stand. And so you fall like crazy just practicing on the bunny hill, and then you go to the bigger and bigger hills. Well, it's like if you are trying to ski without like falling, you're just not going to ski.
I don't know. I feel like when you first get your training wheels off your bike, that's a closer analogy for me personally.
Yeah, but skiing you fall a lot.
Yeah,
you fall a lot too with your bike.
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. Don't think that the habit's just going to happen without like failure. It's just part of the Christian life, and creating a Christian culture within your home that is greater than American culture.
Yeah. Also, don't beat yourself up either. Again, it's hard. Christ said the journey to walk with him is not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. Being countercultural against the American culture around, like I've heard some theologians calling it, oh, we live in a pagan society again, like, which is interesting, which you probably people could debate about, but like, we don't live in a culture that is life abundant.
Well, it's not conducive to the Christian life at all. It's actually quite vicious towards it. One aspect, this will convict everybody. One thing that we all struggle with is kind of like self-customization of our comforts. It's so easy to do in today's world. It's like, these are my favorite songs. These are my favorite foods. These are my favorite shows. We have so much like available to us today. And this even starts at the really young age with kids, that we prune our mindset to love this self-customization. And then the gospel is so different than that.
Very much so.
It's just like, pick up your cross and die daily. And I'm going to actually tell you what to do today. Nicky or Kyle, you're like wake up, die to yourself. And yeah, you have a job to go to, you have school to go to, you have all these things that you have to do, but really my Spirit's going to guide you and tell you what to do and what to say.
Exactly.
That's very different than self-customization. It makes us really, really weak.
Yes, it does.
That's the thing that I think is probably the more toxic parts of American culture that everybody is susceptible to.
Instant gratification too.
Yeah, exactly. The self-customization is the instant gratification. Unless we're customizing these amazing Disneyland experiences for our kids at church, then they hate church. Well, it's like, well, maybe they're hating church because your home life has created an experience for them that isn't like church. And so you need to make your home more like church rather than making church more like your American Disneyland home.
I forget these statistics, but I remember looking at these statistics about how people stay in the faith looking at kids. And if the family just went to church, like I forget the actual stats, but like it was low. And then kids who didn't go to church obviously weren't probably going to stay in the church. Like if the family didn't go.
Right.
And then you have families who eat together and pray together.
Oh, the numbers go way up.
And then they start, like all this like doing all these smaller things, like, just praying together as a family. It's up. And then going to church together, going up. And also like if both parents are going to church too, that helps as well. And then also like serving together too, like actually like participating in the church. The retention rate of families staying in the faith is higher. You don't have to do something huge. And again, just doing something small will create a huge difference, because again, Christ tells us, like, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. This is not a sprint, but a marathon, as Paul says. It's like we need to train ourselves as athletes to run the race.
I think it's easy for spouses to sometimes be like, oh, I wish my husband would do this, or I wish my wife would do this. But really, we're both weak. We're both not that good at it. And so you just go for it. And really what you're doing is you're trying to make strong kids. So when you model it for them, let's say it's only the husband doing it, it's only the wife doing it. Maybe you're in a broken home. There's only you. Or one of the spouses is spiritually checked out. You're modeling for your son and your daughter what it's to be like when they have a family. That can go a long way too. A lot of people have broken family lives, or not the ideal situation that they wanted or planned on. But that doesn't mean that God can't still make something beautiful out of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, kids learn by watching, and so that's why Paul all the time says, be imitators of me as I imitate Christ, so it's like, imitate Christ, imitate Paul, imitate the saints. Again, that's why I love the saints. I love having their memories around all the time and their life stories at our fingertips, on our phones and on our screens, is because that way I can see how they lived the gospel in their life, in their context, and how they reflected Christ, and how I can learn from them how to reflect Christ in my life.
And that's a real easy dinner time right there. You just you got dinner on the table. You say, this is the saint for today. You talk about them, see what the kids know. Pray for people that are in need, that are sick and suffering. And then dive in and eat. And if you know the feast day, and you can even cook the food related to the feast day.
Like there's some, Catholic cookbooks about cooking with the saints, and they follow the saints, and they get some of the stuff, which is pretty cool.
And so if you just do this year after year, you eventually get into like a rhythm where you may not do it every night, but even if you're hitting it up like twice a week, you have a meal, you pray together. Hopefully you're eating together more often, but I know how sports can get with families. But
sports.
I know families that even in high school, they had sports all the time, but they would just, what they started doing is just doing a really late dinner, like 8:30, 9 o'clock dinner with the whole family. And they still did this, and they had, the teenagers were getting older. So they still were able to do an aspect of this.
Yeah. With my father's family, like everyone was always at Sunday dinner. Like Friday, Saturday, they were kind of doing their own thing, but Sunday, everyone was there on Sunday because my grandma was like, Sunday dinner,
Let's do it.
So
that's why every Sunday is supposed to be a holy day or a holiday.
Oh my gosh, holiday.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people can work, but if you don't, there is a way to kind of build up this aspect of it feeling like a holiday. I remember when I was in my class and I said, what would life be like if every Sunday was like Easter or Christmas? And like the family got together and you played games in the backyard and you had a big feast together. All the kids were like, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's kind of like how it was. And it's supposed to be like we kind of looked at those old blue law, what were they called? The blue laws, where like you couldn't have restaurants or businesses open on Sunday. And we kind of looked at like, oh, all this legalism and burden. Yeah. But businesses are closed on Christmas. We're like, oh, good. We're glad that they're closed so they can be
on
with their
Thanksgiving.
families.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we like the idea when it's like a big holiday, but if you transfer every Sunday and you make it into a big holiday in your mind, then you can understand where this is all kind of coming from. We could go on and on, but this is what it means to become a Eucharistic people, to create a Eucharistic home, and become a Eucharistic parish. And so just a few thoughts from the two of us today.
Yep. I hope you find something good to take from this.
A gold little nugget. All right. Well, you all have a happy and blessed Holy Week, Holy Thursday, Holy Friday, Holy Saturday.
Holy Saturday. Don't forget Holy Saturday.
Yeah. Christ ascends into Hades. Yep. And of course, Easter, Holy Pascha. Thank you for joining the Barrel Age Faith. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we will see you the next time we see you.
Yep.
All right.
Soon. So
bye-bye.
Peace.